The Future of a King by Maltheniel, Chapter 12, For the Love of Albion, Part 3. We had the treaty ready to be signed by noon, and once again knights who could teleport were to carry the message to the Saxon camp. Sir Rodney did not leave them this time, however. He had fallen in the battle. The knights came back on foot, safe with the news that the Saxon leaders would come and sign the treaty that night. In the afternoon I found Uncle Merlin gently binding up Aethusa's wings and minor wounds, and went and sat over by him. Despite the fact that she looked exhausted and her white skin was marred in multiple places where spells had been shot at her, Aethusa looked happier and prouder than I ever remember seeing her. "Yes, Aethusa," Uncle Merlin said patiently, as if this was the 21st time he had said this. "You did save Arthur's life. You can consider whatever ridiculous debt you're carrying around in your head cancelled now." "Hey, Uncle Merlin," I said, coming to sit against Aethusa's warm side, clearly in a good mood. She twisted her head out of Uncle Merlin's hand to ruffle my hair with her snout. "Ma," he granted me, "don't distract my dragon. Aethusa, head back here now. I haven't finished yet." He sounded very much like a parent. Aethusa huffed at him like an annoyed child. It made me smile, but I had darker thoughts in my mind just now. I couldn't talk to father or mother about them, because they were the ones who had let me come, and they would regret it if they saw how much the battle had shaken me. And I didn't regret coming, but I thought Uncle Merlin would understand. "You were right about war," I said abruptly. He looked at me over the spines on Aethusa's head. "About war?" he asked, not quite understanding me. I stared at the grass at my feet. "That it's horrible and should be avoided," I whispered. Uncle Merlin sighed, and Aethusa pressed her wing around me and tucked me against her side. For a moment there was no sound but the rasp of cloth on scales as Uncle Merlin finished cleaning a cut on her snout. Then he sat down beside me, and Aethusa tucked us both under her wing. "I wish you didn't have to see war so young," Uncle Merlin said quietly. "It's terrible to witness all the pain and suffering." "You didn't see war until you were older, did you?" I asked him softly. He chuckled a bit. "I grew up a farm boy out in the country," he told me. "I knew bandits as a child, but never all out fighting. Your father saw it more than me, I think." "You'll miss Rodney, won't you?" I asked him quietly. He had been the first magic user Uncle Merlin had trained after the ban on magic had been lifted, and had stayed a good friend. I had never really known death before, except as something that happened to one when you got old and had lived a good life. I had never known young men cut down in the flower of their lives, middle-aged men dying when they should have lived to see the fruit of their labours. I would miss Rodney myself. He had always been a kind man, and had been the first to show all of Camelot just how possible it was for a sorcerer to be an excellent knight, after Mother had dared conventions and knighted him. "Of course," Uncle Merlin said tiredly. He leaned back against the dragon's side, looking worn, small cuts standing out starkly red against his face. "He was a good friend, but he'll be with his Liliana, and they'll be happy." I knew from hints dropped in conversations long ago that Liliana was the woman Rodney had loved, and that she had been killed because of the magic she had. Now I suddenly remembered the conversation on the way here about Freya, the woman Uncle Merlin had loved and lost, and noted the wistfulness in his voice when he spoke of Liliana and Rodney being together. "You'll be happy here, Uncle Merlin," I protested, my voice breaking a bit. I drew closer and curled up against his side like I used to when I was a small boy. He sat up and put his arm around me. "We'll be all right, Amal," he said gently. "The threat is gone, and we'll heal from the battle in time. We have before." But he didn't make any move to get up, and I began to cry softly, trying not to let the images of the wounded and dead fill my head. Uncle Merlin held me and let me cry, and Aethusa curled her wing tightly around us, holding us against her warm side in a white cocoon. We stayed there until I felt less shaky and was ready to face the world again. True to their word, the Saxons appeared at evening to sign the treaty. 15 of them showed up, accompanying their new leader, but they weren't marching in perfect lockstep they had used when they brought the challenge. All of the kings and queens of the 8 kingdoms of Albion and the primary members of their courts stood in the royal tent of Camelot by the table on which the treaty was to be signed. All my beloved uncle knights were there, of course, standing behind Mother, Father, Uncle Merlin, and I. Everyone present at the signing looked both relieved and worn. Some of the Saxons even looked rather apologetic. The signing itself was pretty simple. Father read the terms of the treaty aloud, then as the leader of Albion, he signed it. The Saxons' new leader stepped forward and followed his example. "We shall refrain from attacking you again," he said formally as he had done so, as if to reinforce aloud what he had just signed his name to. Then he and his party turned and left. The Saxon threat was over. Father collapsed into a chair after all the other kings and queens had also retired to their camps. "Well, that was underwhelming," he remarked. "That must be a pity," Uncle Merlin retorted, "to be called back from Avalon for an underwhelming task." "Merlin!" Father retorted. "I didn't say the whole thing was underwhelming, just the conclusion. Or maybe you thought the battle, which I might remind you took you a whole day to win, was child's play." "I should hope not," Uncle Gawain inserted lightly. "I'd hate to see what a real battle looked like if that was the case." Uncle Merlin smiled, looking relieved. "The dragon told me you would return in Albion's need was greatest," he said softly. "If this was Albion's greatest need, then perhaps now we will have peace." "Peace would be very welcome," Father agreed. Then his brain caught up with the rest of his sentence. "Wait, which dragon told you that?"